Unit 2 Vocabulary Words, Sadlier Vocabulary Workshop Enriched Edition, 2012 to 2013 Level D by Jerome Shostak. Before we begin our discussion of Unit 1 words, let's review the parts of speech. When you learn a new word, you have to manage its meaning, but you don't truly own that word until you can use it in a sentence. Using a word correctly in a sentence is governed by its part of speech. Here are the four most likely parts of speech that you're going to encounter in your study of new vocabulary words: adjectives, adverbs, verbs, and nouns. Adjectives are words that modify nouns. That is, modify means to give additional information or detail or description. Adverbs are also modifiers. They modify verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. Don't fall into the trap of thinking that you can quickly identify an adverb because it ends in ly. In fact, the most commonly used adverbs in the English language do not end in ly. And also, some adjectives do end in ly, so you can't always count on that as an indicator of adverbs. Verbs show action, or in the case of linking verbs, they connect ideas. In the Vocabulary Workshop program, you probably will not be learning any linking verbs. Almost all of your verbs will be action verbs. Nouns are places, things, people, or an idea or an abstraction. Admonish. This is a verb that means to caution or advise against something, to scold mildly, or to remind someone of a duty. For example, my teacher admonished us to study our notes for the quiz. In this example, the teacher is giving a warning. She's saying, right now, do this so that you'll be better prepared in the future. That's one use of the word admonish. But admonish can also be used to mean scold. That is, to tell someone that they're not doing something right now, to warn someone after the fact. As in this example, the librarian had to admonish the noisy students several times before they settled down. A third way to use admonish is to remind someone of responsibilities or duties that they have. As in this example, before they left the house last night, my mom and dad admonished me to do the dishes and clean my room. A cognate of admonish is admonition. Notice how we dropped the sh ending from the verb and added tion. The tion suffix, or you might see it sometimes as sion, is one way that we can convert a verb into a noun. Suffixes tell us what part of speech a word is. Prefixes can kind of change the meaning, but suffixes change the part of speech. Breach. A breach is a noun or a verb. As a noun, it can mean a literal rupture or gap or breakage in a structure. It can also indicate a violation or an infraction of rules or agreements. Let's look at the first two examples. Hurricane Katrina did not directly cause the destruction of New Orleans. Rather, a breach of the levees resulted in massive flooding of the city. Here we have an example of the word breach being used to indicate an actual hole or an overflow of a structure. In the second example, we see breach of etiquette as an idiom that indicates someone breaking the rules. Noah committed a breach of etiquette when he failed to write his grandmother a thank you note. Other idioms using the word breach are breach of contract or security breach, both of these indicating a compromise of the integrity of security or a contract. The final use of breach is as a verb, that is to create an opening or break through. Often you hear this use of breach with regard to military action, as in the example we have here. The platoon breached the enemy lines, that is, they broke through the enemy lines. The next word is brigand. Brigand is a noun. It's a reference to a person. It means a bandit, a robber, or an outlaw. Examples: was Robin Hood a hero, or was he just a brigand? Ancient caravans passing through desolate areas were sometimes attacked by brigands. Circumspect. An adjective meaning cautious, careful, or thoughtful. Circumspect is a good example of a word that you could approximate its meaning just by looking at its roots. Or if you don't know what the roots mean, then thinking about cognates or words that are similar. Circum is Latin. It means around. If you didn't already know that, you could consider some cognates that have the root circum in it, such as circumference or circle. These suggest the sense of going around. If you didn't know that spect meant looking or seeing, you could think of some cognates that include that root. Spectator, spectacles, spectrum. These are words that are probably familiar to you, and as you can see, they have to do with looking or seeing. You take the two roots and you put them together, circumspect, and it means to look around. That is, to be careful or cautious or considering all possibilities that are laid out before you. Commandeer is a verb that means to seize for military or official use, to take something over from someone. Here's an example. Under certain circumstances, the U.S. government has the right to commandeer private property. Most people are probably familiar with this from movies you've seen. Remember the movie you've seen that has a police officer or the CIA guy, and he's chasing the bad guy down the street, but he needs to go faster. He needs a car. So what does he do? He finds an innocent citizen who's sitting in their car at a red light or a stop sign, yanks open the door, flashes his badge, tosses out the driver, jumps in the car, and off he goes after the bad guy. This would be an example of commandeering a vehicle. Cumbersome is an adjective meaning clumsy, hard to handle, or slow-moving. For example, the bus was filled to capacity with holiday shoppers carrying large and cumbersome packages. A cognate is unencumbered, which is also an adjective. It means to be free and easy in movement, not weighted down by something you're carrying or burdened by. For instance, students often say that they love summer because they are unencumbered by homework. Deadlock is a compound word. We have two separate words, dead and lock, that have merged to create one word. Both dead and lock indicate a lack of progress, which is a good way to remember what this word means. As a noun, deadlock is a standstill resulting from two opposing forces that refuse to budge on their position. As a verb, deadlock means to bring something to a standstill. In the two examples that follow, I'm going to use deadlock as both a noun and a verb in sentences that are very much alike to show you the difference between the parts of speech. Democrats and Republicans were in a deadlock over the tax bill. Here deadlock is used as a noun. Democrats and Republicans deadlocked over the tax bill. In this example, deadlock is used as a verb. As you can tell, the word deadlock has a negative connotation. The next word, debris, comes to us from the French, so we do not pronounce the last letter S. You pronounce this word debris as if it does not end in S. Debris is scattered fragments or wreckage, pieces of garbage left behind. For example, after the storm, the beach was littered with driftwood and other debris. You've probably seen debris after a big event where people have dropped little bits of garbage here and there, maybe after a party or a concert. Synonyms include detritus, remains, or an interesting idiom, flotsam and jetsam, which means debris floating in the water. How you pronounce the next word depends on how you're using it in a sentence. If you're using this word as a verb, you'll want to pronounce it with a Z sound, diffuse. However, if you're using this word as an adjective, you need to pronounce it with an S sound, diffuse. As a verb, diffuse means to spread or scatter something freely and widely. For example, the scent of garlic and basil diffused throughout the restaurant. That means it spread throughout. As an adjective, Diffuse means wordy or long-winded or something that lacks focus. For example, the mayor's speech was criticized for being not only negative in tone, but also diffuse and off-topic. You might be familiar with a cognate of diffuse, the noun diffusion. In science class, you might have learned that this means the spread of a substance, gas, or particles within a medium, such as liquid or air. Note that when you add tion or sometimes sion as a suffix to a verb, you convert it into a noun. Vocabulary Workshop defines a dilemma as a difficult or perplexing situation or problem, and frequently you'll hear people use the word dilemma to substitute for the word problem. This is a little inaccurate, though, because a dilemma is a certain type of problem. Notice that the word dilemma begins with the letters di. This is a root that means two, like the number 2. When you're faced with a dilemma, you have a specific kind of problem. That is, a problem where you have to choose between two undesirable options. So let's mark out this definition and bring in one that's a little more specific. Here's an example. Nick faces a dilemma. If he doesn't stay at work to finish the project by the new deadline, he's going to be fired. However, if he stays at work, he's going to miss his daughter's high school graduation ceremony, and she's going to be emotionally crushed. Poor Nick, I don't know how he's going to solve this dilemma. Efface is a verb that means to wipe out or erase, or to keep oneself from being noticed. For example, time had effaced almost all the signs of struggle that took place on the battlefield. This means that over time, any evidence that there was a battle had disappeared or been wiped out. In the second example, efface means to keep something from being noticed. All his attempts at charm and confidence could not efface Bob's social awkwardness at the party. A cognate of efface that you might frequently hear is self-effacing. This is an adjective. You hear this word used in describing someone who is modest or humble or doesn't want to draw attention to themselves or to their accomplishments. An actress who's well known for her self-effacing personality is Jennifer Lawrence. If you want to see an example of self-effacing, go to YouTube and click on any video that shows Jennifer Lawrence accepting an award. In all cases, she comes across as just a normal person, not a glamorous Hollywood movie star. Muddle. This word can be used as a verb or a noun. As a verb, muddle means to make a mess of, or it can mean to get by without having any kind of skill or planning or expertise. For example, too much stress and too little sleep will muddle a person's concentration. I didn't study last night, so I had to muddle my way through the exam. As a noun, a muddle is a mess or a disorganized collection of items. As in the picture shown here, her office is no more than a muddle of disorganized files. Synonyms of muddle would be to confuse or mix up, or in the noun form, confusion, disorder. As an antonym, orderliness, neatness, and organization would be the opposite of the noun form of muddle. Opinionated. This is a word that describes someone who is stubborn or unreasonable in holding to their ideas or their opinions. It means having a closed mind and refusing to listen to the ideas or contributions of others. Sometimes people misuse this word and apply it with a neutral connotation to describe someone who merely has an opinion or expresses an opinion. But the word opinionated is clearly negative in its connotation. Use it only when you're describing someone who's kind of obnoxious in the way they express their ideas, or who is clearly shut down to considering other possibilities or discussing opinions and ideas in a rational or reasonable manner. Perennial. You may be familiar with the noun form of perennial. a plant that continues to come back every spring. You don't have to replant it. It comes back automatically. During the winter, it's just in a state of dormancy. As an adjective, perennial means anything that lasts for a long time. It's enduring, or it recurs over and over again. For example, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is a perennial holiday classic. In this sense, perennial is used to mean enduring and long-lasting. It has survived the test of time. In the second example, perennial is used more to mean recurring, something that comes up again and again. Finding a publisher who will accept their manuscripts is a perennial problem for authors. Antonyms of perennial would be anything that doesn't recur or anything that is short-lived, something brief, something fleeting. Predispose. Predispose is a verb that means to be made vulnerable or susceptible in advance. You often hear this with regard to the medical field. People can be predisposed to certain diseases by virtue of their genetic makeup. Here's another medical example. Having allergies seems to predispose some people to getting a sinus infection. But it's not always used in the medical context. It can mean anything that sets someone up in advance for a certain experience later. Here's an example. Growing up alongside wealthy children predisposed the butler's daughter to having expensive tastes and high expectations in her adulthood. Let's do a root analysis. Pre means before. Dispose means to place something apart or away, or to separate it out into a different category. So predispose means in advance to set something up in a specific category. Consider our friend Bart here in the picture. Bart was born with the genetics that would determine later in life that he would go bald. In other words, in advance, by virtue of his birth and his family background, he was already set apart or placed in a category of people that would lose their hair. Relinquish. This is a verb that means to give up control over something. Usually it's used in a context where someone gives up control voluntarily. Here are some examples. The king gladly relinquished his crown so he could marry his true love, a commoner from the village. After the plane took a nosedive, the flight instructor suggested that I relinquish control of the aircraft immediately. Salvage can be used as a verb or a noun. As a verb, it means to save something from being destroyed, as in this example. Fortunately, we were able to salvage a few valuables from the fire. As a noun, salvage indicates the items or the property that could be saved from being destroyed. As in this example, salvage from sunken ships can be of great value to historians. Can you think of a word from Unit 1 that has a similar meaning or might be easily confused with the word salvage? If you said debris, you're right. These two have similar shades of meaning. In the case of debris, we're usually referring to something that doesn't have any value anymore. It's like garbage or pieces of detritus that are just scattered across the water or scattered across the ground. Salvage, however, implies something can be reused or recycled. It still might have some value. Spasmodic is an adjective that means sudden and violent but brief. Something that is fitful or intermittent, that is to say, we can't predict when it's going to happen. Here's an example. Spasmodic flashes of lightning and booming thunder were accompanied by torrential rain. In this sentence, spasmodic tells us that the flashes of lightning could not be predicted. They didn't happen at regular intervals. It also suggests that they were very sudden and that they were perhaps very violent in their nature. A cognate of spasmodic is spasm, and this is a word that means a sudden clenching of a muscle, something that you do not predict, maybe a twitch or a kick of the leg. Spurious. Spurious is an adjective meaning not genuine, not valid, something that is counterfeit or false. We often hear this word used to describe data or information that's used to support a claim or argument. But since the data is incorrect or false, then so too is the argument. Here's an example. The newspaper published spurious data that greatly exaggerated the negative impact of the new tax bill on small businesses. In this sentence, the fact that the data is spurious or counterfeit or false in some way tells us that perhaps this argument is a false argument. The new tax bill maybe didn't have so much of a negative impact on small businesses. Antonyms of spurious are authentic or valid or certified. In other words, data that we can authenticate or prove that it is correct. Unbridled. This is an adjective meaning lacking in restraint, something uncontained or out of control. A cognate of unbridled is the word bridle. This is a noun. It's a head restraint system used to control a horse. You might think of the bit in the horse's mouth and the reins that are used to pull the horse one direction or another. The horse is controlled. So unbridled means not controlled. For example, sometimes the unbridled enthusiasm of sports fans can get a little out of hand. Take a look at the picture. See this guy? He is showing unbridled emotion. He's very excited about a success shown by his soccer team. By contrast, this woman has restrained interest. She is not showing unbridled emotion. This concludes Unit 1 Words. Thank you very much for listening.